Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast where we find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, an architect who spans tech as an angel investor, startup advisor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're a seasoned architect or just starting in the field, this podcast is your gateway to think differently about the role architects play within our global community. Hello, Disruptors. Welcome to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. Today, we're exploring how a residential architecture firm is rethinking not only how they design sustainable homes, but also how they structure their team and expand their impact beyond custom projects. Joining us are Carina Coel, founder and principal architect of Restructure Studio, and Alexandra Chaves, project manager at the firm. Carina launched Restructure Studio in 2010, building a firm known for its commitment to sustainability and client-driven design. Over the years, her work has been featured in the AIA Austin Home Tours, the Wall Street Journal, and Austin Energy Green Building case studies, solidifying the firm as a leader in sustainable residential architecture. But as demand grew, Carina recognized a gap. Many homeowners wanted access to sustainable, well-designed homes, but didn't have the budget or timeline for a fully custom build. That's where Arbor Plans was born. Arbor Plans is a spin-off of Restructure Studio that offers pre-designed, highly efficient home plans, making sustainable architecture more accessible. The goal? To bridge the gap between bespoke design and the practical realities of home building, providing a scalable way to create homes that are beautiful, functional, and deeply rooted in sustainable principles. Alongside Carina, Alexandra Chaves plays a key role in the firm's success, bringing years of experience in custom residential architecture and a passion for empowering women in the profession. She's also been an advocate for flexibility in the workplace, embracing Restructure Studio's fractional staffing model, which offers team members more autonomy while maintaining a high level of design excellence. In this episode, we'll unpack how Restructure Studio is pioneering flexible firm structures, how Arbor Plans is rethinking access to sustainable home design, and what lessons other architects can take from their approach. Let's get started. Hi, Carina. Hi, Alexandra. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you on Practice Disrupted today.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. We are so excited to be here.
Yes, we're super excited to be in your season 10.
Season 10. Countdown to episode 200. So I wanted to, a little bit of an icebreaker for you too, as we kick off 2025. What are you all excited about in the coming year?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really excited about for this coming year, I love working with AIA Austin locally and volunteering with them. And this year I will be the chair-elect for the JEDI committee. And I'm really excited. In the past, had been volunteering a lot with the Women in Architecture committee. So I'm really excited to kind of segue into JEDI and really continue the work that we have kind of established with women in architecture and I'll find out what else we're doing, in that space. So that's one of the things that I'm really looking forward to this year.
Great. Carina, Alexandra, anything for you?
Yes, I'm excited to be the new chair for Women in Architecture in Austin. And again, Carina gratefully this before me, and then I stepped in at 2024 as a chair-elect, and I think I'm excited to just be the chair of 2025. We have so much programming going on, and also I'm really excited that you are going to be our president for AIA National in general, because that's all part of the volunteer organizations that Carina and I are very involved with. And I'm excited that the firm last year on 2024, we got a Preservation Merit Award for an infill project that we did. And it was part of the home store that we had the last weekend of October as part of the AIA Austin. And it's been a minute since we have been as part of that home store that is very prestigious here in Austin, but also that it's just such a joyful kind of like 360, because when I first joined Restructure Studio, that was one of the first things that I actually got to volunteer with Carina. She's like, you're starting, and this is what we're going to be doing this for a weekend. And we were able to have, again, one of the residents that won Preservation Merit Award last year as part of the tour. So it's just really exciting for our firm to be recognized at such sustainable projects.
So I think we need to talk about how big your firm is and how much time you guys spend towards volunteering and why. But before we do that, why don't we learn a little bit more about Restructure Studio? I'm guessing, Carina, you might want to kick us off for this question.
Yes. So I started Restructure Studio in 2009 into 2010. And the reason was I was working for another firm in Austin and I had my first child, my daughter. And I realized quickly that I just needed more flexibility with my schedule than what I was able to achieve with the workplace I was in. And so I decided to take the bold leap and go off on my own and try starting my own firm with the intention of, creating the workplace that I needed to be a mom and to still be an architect, as well as I really wanted to focus on sustainability in my practice as well. And that was a big deal for me. So yeah, I started by working in my bedroom, while my daughter was napping, while she was an infant. And slowly I got more work and I started finding other women that I knew who I'd worked with previously, who also happened to be moms who weren't looking for full-time work. I wasn't ready to bring on a full-time employee. I didn't even have an office space yet, but I just needed extra support. And so I slowly started to put together this small firm with other women who were looking for part-time work, who were looking for flexibility. And that's exactly what I was looking for as well. I wasn't trying to grow this big firm quickly. I wanted to take it slow and make sure that it would be sustainable for myself and for the team. And so it was this really beautiful development where, we would get more and more projects. I would bring on another person, but they would also be part-time and have flexible hours. We eventually actually got an office space. We, continued to grow and yeah, it has really been a joy for me to put this company together because I was finding that I was having trouble finding a workplace that suited the schedule that I needed as a young mom. And I was really excited to figure out along the way with starting this company for myself that I could provide that workspace for other women as well. And we have hired men in the past. I don't want it to come across like I only hire moms. It happens that we are all women right now. We are all moms in our firm. And that has been the majority of my employees have been women who are not looking for the 40 to 60 to 80 hour, work weeks that we can see in other architecture firms, but that still wanted to be involved. They still wanted to pursue licensure. They still wanted to be up to date on the latest software and design and codes and everything. And so yeah, it just kind of worked itself out. And then eventually we got busy enough that I did need to hire somebody full time. And that's where Alexandra came in. She's my first full-time employee. And that has been great as well. Just to have somebody who is available, on a full-time schedule. It really helps us to balance out.
And I want to get into, Alexandra, why you were so interested in joining Restructure Studio. But before we do that, Carina, I just wanted to ask a question about, you mentioned that you wanted greater flexibility. You felt you had to go off on your own. No firm was offering what you needed, especially what you felt you needed as a new mom within the industry. I feel like that's an inflection point for a lot moms or even new parents in this space. But it's also a really hard one to make because a lot of people don't know a lot about business and architecture. So what gave you the courage, I would say, to go off and start on your own?
It was scary. I felt very fortunate that I had a lot of support from my husband. He actually stayed in a job and a career that he did not like for several years while I got my feet under me with Restructure Studio. So we were both in this kind of interesting transition point in our careers, but I had the immediate need of needing or wanting to have more time with my child. And he saw that. And so I'm very grateful to him that he kind of stuck it out with this other job that he had, that had like a salary and benefits and everything so that I could take the leap and start my firm. But I do feel like in the end, we've been able to kind of pay each other back because once Restructure Studio was started, he wanted to go back to school and get his master's degree and start a whole nother career. And so he's now been able to do that. He helped me get Restructure Studio started by staying in his career. And now, I've been able to support the family while he transitioned into he wanted to become a licensed therapist. So he's now a therapist and doing the good work with mental health. So yeah, it does take a team. Or at least for me, it did. I don't know that I could have done it without his support, especially as a new mom. And so I am very grateful to him for that. And it does take courage, but I would like to say, if you're thinking about, starting your own firm, to look around for your support system. It doesn't have to be a spouse or partner. It could be family, it could be friends. There's a lot of ways that we can find support in our lives. And I think that if you're encouraged and inspired to go off and start your own small firm, I think you should go for it. And I will say, kind of to one of the other parts of your question, I really did not have a lot of business training. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn. I remember the city of Austin offered these free accounting classes, as part of their small business program. And I remember sitting there with my daughter in her stroller, while she was napping and taking these classes, learning how to use QuickBooks because I had to learn how to send an invoice if I was going to get paid. And so I think if you are excited enough and inspired enough to do it, then it can, you can find the resources that you can teach yourself the parts that you don't know and make it work.
So Alexandra, let's hear a little bit about you and your decision to go and work with Carina, because I feel like, so much of the emphasis is placed on obviously owners and the decision to say, I have enough money to bring on a person full time. But I feel like you went from a different size firm to come and work at Restructure Studio. And I feel like there's a little bit, the first employee can't help but feel there's a little bit of risk in joining. So what attracted you to Restructure Studio?
Well, my whole story to get to Restructure Studio was after I lived in New York for 12 years and we decided to move to Texas to be closer to family because I'm originally from Venezuela, but my family's no longer there. Like my immediate family, like mom, dad, brother, they're all here in Texas. So my husband and I decided to come to Austin. And I had found a job previously before Carina, and I stayed there for only 8 months. And then I started looking for jobs. But I remember that when I went to interview with Carina, I came with like questions of like, I interview her besides interviewing, she interviewed me.
It was very impressive. That's one of the reasons I hired you.
So yeah, like all of these like things that she was envisioning for her company, and that it just clicked that she was a mom and how things were so different from the Northeast and coming down to Texas. People want to know you before they hire you. So that's one of the things that attracted me to be applying for Restructure Studio. And then when Carina and I met up for the second time, she's like, I want to go for coffee. And I'm like, okay. But I was like, this is not typically what New Yorkers will do. They will bring you to their office. They will send you an email. Here's the offer. And, kind of thing. And that's how I feel kind of more in love with like Restructure Studio and the way the firm is run. It's more, it's very open and it's open door policy. I feel you can come anytime and ask any questions. You get involved. I've always been, because I am neurodiverse, I do have dyslexia and I am attention disorder person that I've been diagnosed since I was little. And they even told my mom that I would never make it to college. And I am the only one that made it to a master's degree in my family from my brother and I. And, just having that, I've never been a fan of big firms, especially like Gensler size. I'm more of a small firm because I feel like you get that attention or you get the one-on-one more easily and you get involved early on instead of having to be wing sighting somebody as a mentor until like you grow into that next, until you actually get into the next step before getting into out of on a job site and things like that. I feel like when you're in a big firm, you only oh, they're drafting or they're doing this or they're doing modeling. And that's what I like for a small firm. And just the reason behind what Carina started her business, just that flexibility that we do understand that we have jobs, that we do have a family at the same time and there are emergency that comes. And as long as you're, making your hours and doing your work, you're rewarded. And then also she encouraged me to volunteer. She was the one who first brought me to a women in architecture meeting pre-pandemic. So everything has changed since then. But yeah, it's a great place to work. And a lot of people will say no, because we're all women. We're always getting in each other's nerve, but it's not the way we do it at Restructure Studio. We try to use each other's strengths to, get the best for our firm. And, we're very small.
I think that's a great point, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Alexandra, because like when you're talking about like the two-way interview, I mean, it's a small firm. There's technically six of us, but there's really like four of us who meet regularly, and the culture and like the personality fit is such an important factor to make sure that everything's going to work. And so I just wanted to bring that up. If you're thinking about starting a small firm or thinking about interviewing or joining a small firm, like make sure that you feel comfortable there and that you're comfortable with the people you're working with, because I think that's almost the most important thing. Most people can learn, whatever they need to learn. But if you don't get along and support each other in the right way, I think that can be super difficult. So I'm very grateful that we have such a close knit team that really cares about each other. And that was super important to me in putting together the people we work with.
I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. So Carina, as a small firm owner, I feel like, all small firm practitioners and all of their employees are always wearing multiple hats, right? You have to do a little bit of everything about the project. And some people would say that's actually why they like to work at small firms. I think the flip side of that is it's easy to get overwhelmed with just everything that you have to do, right? You don't have a marketing department. You don't have a business development department. You guys are doing all of it. So why do you take so much time and volunteer and invest your time into being a part of JEDI, being a part of Women in Architecture? Why do you feel like that's actually so important enough that you would drag Alexandra to an event?
Yeah, I think it really started to click for me. This was pre-pandemic. I want to say like a few years in. At first I was getting my feet under me, like learning how to be a mom, learning how to run a business, learning how to do accounting, all of these things. So I did have my head a little underwater. It was overwhelming. I think it is important for us to address that not everything is easy and that it's not all perfect. I think that is one of the things about social media that drives me crazy, is everyone presents themselves as it's all easy and I have it all figured out. So it was difficult, and it is difficult to wear all of those hats. But overarching, on top of all of that, I started to see that I was attracting other moms and women to the firm and providing them with this space where they could continue to pursue their careers and continue to, strive for a work-life balance that I feel like is difficult in our profession. And so it just made me realize that I wanted to really get involved on another level with helping to support women in our industry. Like I found that I had this model that worked for me, and it looked like it was working for other women on my team. And so, I actually started giving, it was so funny. I was asked to give a lecture on sustainability for like an Architalks right before the pandemic. And I wanted to talk about how to keep it sustainable for women to be in the profession. And they wanted me to talk about like sustainability in terms of like, green building and how to be energy efficient and everything. So I started talking about that. And then halfway through the talk, I segue into how can other architecture firms keep women in the practice? How can we make the
That's
work
awfully
environment?
sneaky of you.
It was very sneaky, but I think it was well received. And it was my first, I interviewed other women who worked at all sorts of different sizes of firms. And it really kind of inspired me to continue on this path. And that's when I started. That was around the same time that the Women in Architecture Committee in Austin had just been formed. And so that, I went to the first Shape the Conversation exhibit that was here, and then started to meet other women who were really pioneers in the industry, and so it all just kind of coalesced at the same time that I was seeing what was happening in my firm, I was seeing what was happening in the city, and then I was also just inspired. Every firm and every workplace culture is different, but how can we impact those to make it so that it's easier for women to bridge that gap from, we've all seen the numbers of, architecture schools are graduating approximately 50-50 men and women, and then you get to licensure and it's roughly 25% women and 75% men. How do we keep those women graduating from architecture school to getting all the way through licensure and pursuing their careers? And I think there's a lot that we can do. I think it's come a long way, but there's a ways to go as well. And I'm just excited to take what I've learned from my experience so far and see if we can help other firms and other women in whatever situation they are to pursue that.
Alexandra, how do you value this time that Carina has given you to participate? And, how has it helped you grow in your career and as an employee of Restructure Studio?
I really value everything that Carina does, and I say it constantly. Just recently, we were having a discussion about it too, and I always tell her like how grateful I am for letting me grow professionally, letting me grow personally, and letting me grow in my community as well. Because I feel like getting involved with organizations such as AIA or NOMA or any of these, there are part of your circle that you actually do as part of a professional level as well, but more of like giving back to your community. I feel like it's really important. I think you're leaving something behind that somebody else can then take on and keep on growing it, like the same has happened for women in architecture. Again, it's a committee that it started very it's only 7 years old, and it's one of the committees that it's mostly active in our community and in our nation, I want to say. It's very stepped on, we have a lot of initiatives and things like that. And I feel like that has given me an exposure that I never thought that I would had as being part of a women-owned firm and women-owned employees firm. And then also because of that involvement that Carina gratefully has given me volunteer time throughout the month, you have certain hours that you can do, but again, we have to make sure we have getting our billable hours. We're a very small firm, and in order to keep our firm alive and afloat, we have to still do work. But I feel like some of this work also leads you to new connections and new collaboratives. It happened that even at a birthday party, another parents were contractors and now they're working with us, and they also now are supporters of women in architecture because it's a team of a husband and wife. But I feel like if it wasn't because of that you do these social gatherings or you go to these events, I don't think you sometimes you don't end up collaborating with some of your own community that I think it's very important. So I think for me, I will be eternally grateful. And again, to all of the other recognitions that I have gotten personally because of Restructure Studio. They helped me put a nomination this past year to be Associate Member of the Year. And I didn't believe in myself that I could do this initially. I was like, am I there? I'm not sure because I'm still not licensed. And that's one of the things that I want to do after I finish with Women in Architecture, because it does take so much of my time that I cannot do both at the same time. And Carina has encouraged me a lot. She's like, Alexandra, when are you going to get your license? I'm like, I'm getting there. And that's another thing that I want to say, that not until I got to Restructure Studios, and I never thought that I would do it. When I was in New York, I was like, maybe I can get registered, but I'm not sure. I'm in New York. I'm a fish in a pond. I don't know if I need the license here. Everything's mostly interior architecture, and then it's all the liability insurance and all these other things. But not until I got to work on their women leadership is that yes, I can probably do this. Of course you can. And then having the support of your boss and your team, because even Melissa, one of our part-time employees, she got licensed when she was pregnant, and she kept telling me too, Alexa, I was like, so why did you go to study architecture and then you're not going to get licensed? And I'm like, yeah. But I guess I needed to be more involved, have all these other things that are at the same time, sometimes are overwhelming because I never thought of myself of being on the spotlight or being the person that people are looking up to, that I was like, yes. And then having the support of Carina and the network that we have built with Women in Architecture, that they do have licensure opportunities and they give scholarships for people that are trying to help, when they don't have the means or their companies are not paying for going through exams. I feel like it's very important to get involved, because then again, I think the networking is very important.
Enjoying the show? Join a community of fellow disruptors at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Your membership helps support the production of this podcast, Practice Disrupted, and funds the creation of more resources for all of you. Looking forward to growing together. Join us today at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. No, thank you both for that. I want to go back a little bit to the focus on Restructure Studio, of course. And one of the most interesting things that I find about Restructure Studio is kind of, Carina, how much part-time help that you have taken on. I think people are always like, when is the next full-time employee? So you mentioned that you have, at any given time, you're really like four to six people right now. Alexandra is your only full-time employee at the moment. So how do you manage a workforce of part-time employees? What does that work look like? Are they 1099? Are they W-2? How do you know? Do you bring them on when you have when do you know to increase their workload, decrease the workload? How do those conversations all work out?
Oh yeah, I like it. We're getting into the nitty gritty. This is great. So these are all great questions. Everyone started as 1099. And then when I opened an office, I talked to my accountant and he said, if they're working on your computers and with your software, then they need to be W employees of your firm. And I said, okay, great. So then we made everyone employees. And even if they were part-time, they were employees of the firm. And then COVID happened and we all went remote again for a while. And so it's been a good learning experience. We are now a combination. Myself, Alexandra, and our operations manager are all three employees of the firm because of our time in the office and on the computers. And then, like I said, we our employees that are part-time, kind of hourly as needed, we've shifted them back to 1099, especially, with the economy this last year, the interest rates and everything, with work slowing down a little bit. It just made the most sense for everyone. And so it is a constant learning curve, though, like figuring out what's the best model for the team and for each employee and how to make it work. So I hope that gives a little bit of light into how we decide, if someone's joining the team, if they're going to join hourly and they have their own laptop and that sort of thing, then we usually just bring them on as a 1099. If they're going to be more involved, regularly with us, then we make them an employee. And yeah, the conversation, honestly, again, it's a small team, so it is very personal, how each person's schedule gets set up. And so when I first started, it was when I didn't have enough time to get everything done. That's when I knew that I needed to bring somebody else on. When I was spending all day in meetings or going to job sites and then coming home and still needing to pick up all the red lines and get all the drafting done, I said, okay, I need to bring in someone to help me. And that's how I hired my first employee, Maite, who's still with me on an as needed basis. And then, as we got busier, especially like Alexandra mentioned, when she came on, we had a house on the AIA Homes Tour. We were getting a lot more exposure. The firm was growing. And so I said, I actually feel like I have enough work to support paying someone full time and knowing that I'll have enough to keep them busy. Because as any small firm owner knows, I think that one of the biggest challenges in running a small firm is just the workflow, like the pipeline, knowing, is there enough work coming in to keep everyone busy? Is this too much work? Did we overcommit to this and now we can't deliver the level of service that we want to provide? Or, is there not enough work coming in to support the team and what we're trying to accomplish with our, financial goals and everything? So it is very tricky to navigate. And again, that's where this flexible work team has really been a huge benefit. Like I said, I started the firm that way just because that's what worked best for me. And the people that I knew who were looking for work, that's what worked best for them. And I was so excited that it worked well for all of us. And then, now that Alexandra's full-time and my operations manager, that was another amazing hire. Like when I was able to just give someone else all of the non-billable work that I was doing, all of the accounting and the contracts and the payroll and marketing and HR and IT and like you mentioned before, Evelyn, all of the hats that we have to wear as a small firm. And so that has been a huge help as well. But yeah, so we really, especially with how the workflow has been from COVID, when it went nuts, like we are a residential firm, like we design residential projects. And so everyone was stuck at home and they all wanted to improve their home. And we were so busy to now when, interest rates skyrocketed last year, and everything kind of just went on hold because people were unsure. We just had the election. They're still not sure what's going to happen. And so being able to know that some of my employees are not depending on me to pay their rent or pay their mortgage, that they have other stuff going on, but that they still want to be involved when it works out, has really helped us, so that when we need to scale up, I ask them if they're available and if they can come in and help out with some of the workload. And when we cool off a little bit, I say, hey, are you guys okay if I don't send you something this month? How are you? We always are constantly checking in, and I want to make sure that everyone is covered for what they need. But that has been so helpful for me as a small firm owner to have that flexibility. And it does have its challenges, though. Like, we do run into situations where if we're really busy and, someone has a sick kid or someone doesn't have enough, can't give me all the time that I need at that point, then it falls on me. I still need to, at the end of the day, make sure it gets done. But I would say for the most part, the benefits definitely outweigh the challenges. And it's been a really great setup for our firm.
And I wanted to add that also before the pandemic, we started using Slack and a little bit of Notion. And that's the way kind of we communicate with our external part-time employees, because everything's organized there by project and we can just tag them along whenever we need the help.
I want to focus a little bit more on kind of the stable of part-time employees that you have. I think, a lot of people think about bringing people on and they think about, oh, it's just going to be so much trouble to onboard them. I mean, right? Every firm has their own different standards. Is it the same handful of employees that you always go back to? When do you decide, or how do you decide to increase even that part-time help? And how do you onboard them, and ensure that they have the right set of skills that you need for the type of help that you need on projects?
Right. So at the moment, we do have a consistent team for over 5 years now, and so it is easy for me to go and say, hey, are you available to kind of come in and help out with this or not? And that has been amazing. And in terms of onboarding, that is always hard and scary, and it's an investment, right? And so I will say again, I was fortunate that when I first started the firm, the majority of the part-time employees that I was looking to hire had worked at the firm that I previously worked for. So we had similar training and we all kind of knew the same. So I will say and again, I am grateful to that firm. We left on very good terms. They're still mentors to me. They're the ones who would reach out to me and say, hey, this person, is looking for part-time work. Would you be interested? It was not something where I felt like I was trying to take anybody away or convince them to do something different. However, that is one of the things that inspired me to hire someone full-time, because I quickly realized that wasn't sustainable long-term, right? I wasn't always going to be able to hire people that had worked at the same firm that I had. And so when I hired Alexandra, she had not worked. We had different backgrounds in terms of training and everything. And so I saw the investment there of having her come up to speed on our system, but then knowing that I needed that person who could then help me train whoever was going to be the next, part-time employee or full-time employee, if, whenever we're ready to get to that point, because it takes time and it takes money and it takes patience, but it is important.
I don't know, Alexandra, if you wanted to add anything from an employee perspective, or even like how you interact with as a full-time employee and the expectations and responsibilities that you have versus kind of the part-time employees.
I think sometimes they're pretty much, again, since we used to work all together pre-pandemic, I think they're pretty much kind of the same roles, and we know we know each other so well at this point. And I've been with Carina for over 6 years, going to 7. And we were working all together. I think the only new person that we actually brought on throughout the years was interior design. We have had 2 different interior designers, also a part-time employees, but then we were all always, as long as we were on that Slack channel or in constant communication, I think our workflow has always have been able to get to where we need to and answer the information that we need for the client. So yeah, I think it's really good. And also sometimes Carina gets on an email and she's like, oh, we'll get to you this shortly. I'm like, Carina, I'm not sure if we are assuming that I can do this shortly, but we have all these other things that we need to do. So that's when like, okay, we might need to looping into like Maite or Melissa or somebody else to make sure that we are actually answering that one person that you said surely. And I don't know what you mean by surely. It's like at the end of the week or next week.
You're calling me out, Alexandra. I'm always a glass half full person. I'm like, oh yeah, we can get that done. Sure, let's do it.
And again, it happens both
we
ways.
do.
Yeah, it happens. But sometimes, there are unexpected things that happen throughout the week. And we have Monday meetings and weekly meetings that we actually get project status that always help us to kind of like assign and make sure that everybody knows what they're doing, and or if we need to bring in that part-timer, because again, we might need the help to get that information out. And yeah, even sometimes for me too, I was like, I'll get that over. And then I tell Karina, oh my God, it took longer than I expected. And we get to the end of the week and I am grateful that I got through the goal.
So in addition to Restructure Studio, Carina, I would say even with your so-called lack of business knowledge, you decided to launch Arbor Plans. Can you speak to us, one, a little bit about what Arbor Plans is, and then two, why you guys wanted to launch it?
So Arbor Plans is a sister company to Restructure Studio, and we started it in 2019 with the idea that, so Restructure Studio, we do custom residential design for our clients. And with Arbor Plans, we are starting to offer pre-designed home plans that can be purchased more like a product rather than a service. However, it is attached to an architecture firm. And so it is a plan design that you can purchase that, you have the full support of an architecture firm ready to help you make sure that that home plan will fit on your property appropriately, that we can help you get permits, make any adjustments as needed. And so, yeah, it started for kind of two reasons. We were talking a little bit before about, as I started to get involved with women in architecture and my volunteerism. And when some of those early women in architecture meetings, there was like a dinner series the first year. It was really a thing in Austin. And I remember going to these dinners and hearing other women talk about their roles in their firms, like bigger firms, and how they were frustrated that they would be on a project team, but not really get the recognition of being on the team. Like it would always go to the one principal or partner or whoever who was the architect or the name of the firm. And some firms are good about that, but not all of them. And so I was hearing these women talk about that and how, because, one of the many goals of women in architecture is to see more women get licensed and also to move on to become fellows. And to do that, you have to show the work that you've done, right? And it's really hard if you're working and working and working, but you are not getting the recognition that you necessarily feel like you deserve. And so I was also at the same time, so I had this firm of women, and I was also looking for a way to get some passive income going for our business, because, it's also frustrating. You work and you work, but there's only so many hours that you can work. And we felt like it would be nice if there was another way to bring in money to help us grow financially and into a more successful business. So all of these things were rummaging around in my head, and I said, okay, great, let's give this a shot. And so we launched Arbor Plans, and the concept is that each of my employees, everyone is an amazing designer, whether they're licensed or not as an architect, but everyone's been to architecture school. And I wanted to give them the opportunity to see a design all the way through, from beginning to end, from schematic concept through all the development, construction documents, the whole thing, just because I think that's a really good experience, which again, we strive for at our firm. As Alexandra mentioned, it's a small firm. Everyone kind of wears all the hats, but you don't always get to see that super consistently on the same project necessarily, because we're always putting out fires and everyone's being shuffled to whatever needs attention at that moment. So I really liked this idea that they would have this consistent design experience for their projects. And then on the website, they get full credit. So, on our website, we have different plan options, and it lists the name of the designer or the architect who designed that plan, which they will always, have the rights to and be able to point to say, look, this is something that I did. And now are seeing their work built, as the plans get sold and we are moving more of the plans into construction. I think it's like one of my favorite things about being an architect is to drive by a project I designed and say, show my kids like, hey, look, I did that. Like that's a thing that I did. And I want that for all of my employees. And I'm really excited that they have that opportunity to be a part of that process.
And I wanted to add that not only that I am like super grateful for that opportunity, because again, now I can say there's a build, you can go to the website and there's this main house or this ADU designed by Alexandra, but also that initially we thought this was going to be more like individual client driven, that they were looking for a lot and they needed a home to be built. And it just kind of pivoted that it's developers that are coming to us for us to place the different projects that we have already on a site, and kind of like then we just help them, they purchase the home plans from us, and we also do have interior different finish out portfolios that they can either buy from us or not. They can do their finish out, but we still give them like a laundry list that we call them on our architectural set, that how many square footage for tile or finishes in the actual plan set. But it's just like interesting that we thought it was going to be like homeowners that they could not afford a Restructure Studio fee, and they were going to come to us to buy these plans to put on their beautiful lot.
which also does happen, but yes, we sell it to homeowners, but we do, to your point, Alexandra, sell it to developers as well.
So it sounds like an unexpected pivot. Was that just because more developers found Arbor Plans?
I think so. And also, it was launched at a time when Austin was going through huge amounts of growth. And so there was just a lot of development work happening at the time. And so, as we said, it wasn't really our intention, but I am interested in diversifying our clientele and trying to get projects. And also, we designed these home plans to the same standard level of drawing that we design our custom homes. So they are very detailed drawings. Like we're giving them so much information. And so we do feel like even if it is being built as a development, it is still going to be a well-built home, well executed, incorporate sustainable design strategies that are important to us, that, as we see Austin and Central Texas grow or continue to grow, that if some of those homes that are being built by developers, we know can be well-built homes, then I think that's a positive. So.
Yeah. And I think it for us internally also was a very good way to kind of evaluate what we were actually putting out in our drawings for like notes wise and sustainability wise. And since we're so focused on that, when we were building Arbor Plans, we were putting all these notes, plus even more that now we implement those in Restructure Studio. So it was a very good exercise to get that. And then each of us was working on an individual project, and there were like things coming up. It's like, are you getting the same thing? Or, is this applied to yours that applies to mine? And this kind of thing. So
it was a good exercise to help us streamline our internal processes.
That's amazing how it's kind of created a synergy with the main business and back and forth. To whatever extent you're comfortable, Carina and Alexandra, could you explain how the internal mechanisms of that works from a profit sharing mechanism? Only because obviously, Alexandra as an individual, I think I would have loved the opportunity to see a project from start to finish as a whole, as a young designer. But obviously, Carina, until you sell that plan is kind of, it's overhead time. And then, Alexandra, you obviously get credit on the website, but then, if somebody is picking your design 20 times over the next design on the website, how do you share the love there?
Right. So from the beginning, the whole point of Arbor Plans was to be a way to bring in extra money to support, Restructure Studio and to support the firm. And so I will say, for better or for worse, we have sold some of our plans, but we, as you mentioned, Evelyn, there was a lot of overhead and time and investment that went into creating the plans in the first place. And so we're, I think, getting close to the point where we've almost recouped that. And so moving forward, the idea is that they would be there to support buying new software or, bonuses and all of that stuff. But we don't have a formal plan in place for specific profit sharing in terms of each if each plan is sold, then a portion of that goes to that designer. I think because when we first started, we're like, we don't know how this is going to work. We don't know what's going to sell. We don't know, how much money we're going to make from it. And so the concept is to really support the firm as a whole. And so any money that does come in, is the idea is that it's equally distributed to enhance everyone's experience. But I think it's a good question, and something that as we move forward and hopefully continue to create more plans and sell more plans, that the whole idea is that I want to support the women and the team that work for me. So it is definitely something that will be discussed as we move forward. But yeah, unfortunately, we're not rolling in dough from
Well, no, I mean, not even rolling in dough, but I'm just saying, obvious, even starting that up, right? So
yes.
So were you covering overhead costs, or
to get it going?
Learning and development? Yeah.
For the most part, and we did get a little bit of angel investment as well.
Oh, amazing.
From family, in order to make it happen. Because you're right, there was I think when we're getting ready to launch the website, there was at least a month or so where we just worked on Arbor Plans and we were not doing any other billable work. And just to cover the overhead of the firm, we had to bring in some outside help to make it happen. So yeah, again, leaning on my resources for sure was a big deal to make sure that we could make this happen. So,
but also very much an investment in your team as
yes.
the owner of Restructure Studio, and I'm sure you're grateful that you kind of through that process was able to streamline some of your own processes within the main business as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think overall it was positive, and also at the beginning, Carina was like, we met with some realtors thinking that the homes that we needed to design needed to be certain size. And again, the codes have changed here in Austin. And I feel like now they're getting a little bigger, or some of them smaller, depending on the ADU regulations. And since we're trying to build for this area and cater for this area, even though the plans could actually be sold anywhere as long as Carina can have a reciprocity stamp and, stamp these drawings and things like that. But also, I think the interesting part was when we talked about, initially we thought it was client driven and homeowners, but then the developers were driving that, and we were actually designing. There were homes that were being designed only for Arbor Plans that we can then put in the portfolio of the website. And Carina was like, okay, we're getting this developer is interested in doing this too. Alexandra, you're building this ADU and this main house yourself. Of course, I'll oversee everything. But it was more because of the way the site was done. And then slowly we've been actually adding more and more to our portfolio because of that. Or we have built a house before and it had a carport, and all of a sudden, oh no, they wanted to convert it to a garage, enclosed garage. So now we have an option. It's this home has a 2-bedroom and a 3, with a carport. It can also be a garage, or, So it actually worked to our advantage that we were able to actually explore thanks to some of these developers that were also coming to us with these specific requests.
So, I mean, I think there's so many great little tidbits of advice for people that are thinking about starting up their own firm, how to supplement your workforce if you're a small firm leader, and then even opportunities to develop passive incomes. Just Alexandra, when you were saying that, I was like, well, essentially every product that you do develop for somebody else, if you can easily site adapt it, you could essentially turn it into a plan that you then sell. But then my head was also turning wow, you have to update Arbor Plans every time there's a big code revision or to make sure that all those plans in that library are up to date. So when they do sell, they are getting that complete package. But what advice do either of you have for kind of the future of the profession? We talked a lot about women, but I think this applies to all caregivers, right? Even if you're part of the sandwich generation, I'm caregiving for elderly parents as well as young kids, wherever you are on the spectrum. What advice do you guys have for people in the profession, or do you find yourself giving a lot to the next generation of leaders?
I would say my advice is in terms of starting a firm or trying to, employ a flexible workforce, is to just be patient and to stick with it, which I know sounds not super exciting, but I think as we as architects know, with almost all the work that we do, everything takes a little bit longer than we think it will to get done. And so I think if I had known exactly how hard it would be to start a firm or to start a second company, I might not have necessarily done it. But I'm so glad that on this side of things that I did. So I think just if you feel called to try to start your own firm, or if you already have a small firm and you want to try to grow it with a flexible workforce, to kind of surround yourself with your resources like I talked about, or figure out what those resources are, give yourself that support system, and then don't give up. There's going to be some challenges. There will be stuff that you don't know or that you feel like you don't know, and it'll feel really hard. But I'm so grateful that I stuck with it and taught myself the things that I didn't know, and that when one resource ran out, I went looking for another one because I didn't want to go back. And I think it is also just so important that, to your point, Evelyn, of anyone who is a caregiver in our generation or the next generation, to really look for that supportive and collaborative and hopefully flexible workspace. I think if you have the luxury of interviewing people that you're going to hire, or if you're interviewing for a job, to really take that into account, that we all need this kind of flexibility in order to have a full life. And one thing I wanted to say is it does take a lot of trust. Like, the people that I hired, I trust implicitly. I know that when they tell me that they're working on something or that they're going to get something done, that they will, even if that means that they have to leave at 3 to go take a kid somewhere, and then they're back at the computer at 10 o'clock that night. I give them the flexibility to get the work done when they can get it done, and that they'll tell me if they can't do it, or if they tell me that they will do it, that it'll happen. And so I'm kind of all over the place here, but yes, be patient. Try to find that workplace environment that works for you. Or if you're building your firm, try to find the people that you feel like you can connect with and that you can trust. That I think that's so much more important than whatever skill set you think is on their resume, because I think most people are willing and happy to learn. And so yeah, I think for me, it's really provided this joyful space that I really care about all of the people on my team, and I really care about my job, and I care about the work that we're doing for our clients, and I also care about our community. And having this kind of flexible setup has allowed me to focus on my family, to focus on my job, and to focus on volunteerism. And yes, it does get really hard. I also think we should also own up to the fact that this job is difficult and no one has it figured out. But if you just keep trying and kind of give yourself a flexible setup if possible, that it can be really rewarding.
Yeah. And from my side, again, I don't have a small business, but being part of a small business, I see sometimes the struggles of certain things, but I love the way that we can be flexible as you trust. There's the trust that Carina talked about, that that you're getting things done and you can still have that work-life balance, that whatever that is for you, because again, that's very personal. And that's what I actually joined Restructure Studio in the first place. And then also I feel like on the other side, for like as a new professional or emerging professional, I would say getting involved is also great, but do it to a degree where, you're not over your head, and you can make sure that you're not delivering at your job. Because I think some people kind of then lose track of what their day-to-day will be after. Again, volunteerism can be for a couple of years, and then you will go back to what you need to do, but you need to still be actually, feeding those roots and, putting the mulch on that tree to make sure it's growing and it's not going to die by the time you're done doing your volunteer work. So I would say, yeah, to that new generation, and don't be afraid to ask questions. I know the new millennial people don't have the same opportunities that we had for sometimes in-person internships, and some of them are remote and they don't even know what they're doing, or they've never worked in an office. So I think look for whatever works for you, and just be patient and take time to take care of yourself first. Because I don't think if you don't take care of yourself first, you are not going to be able to take care of others or deliver what you need to do. And don't get to the point that you're going to be burned out, because I know it could happen in any profession. It could be very overwhelming pretty quickly for a lot of people if you don't take care of yourself first, mentally, personally, And your support system is very important too. Finding your support system. It could be with your family, or like Carina said, like this year, like I feel like Women in Architecture has been a great supported. And one of the programmings that we put was like how to start a small firm. And we got an architect to be a moderator. We got an interior designer, a landscape, and a builder. They were all women, but it's like, you have to get everybody's perspective, and because every business is so different to start. So find your resources and just don't be afraid to ask questions and take care of yourself. I would say that would be my advice.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.